Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt, Carson. Tanner, I've been excited for this episode, and I think you are as well. What's going on is, our last interview with Jennifer Lee from Entry Envy, she talked a lot about self-awareness being a key strength of a leader, and she went on and talked about doing a lot of self-assessments that you might find in the corporate world, Strengths Finder and BP10 and DISC and Enneagrams and all of these other things that both you and I have done multiple times, right? So we were chatting afterwards, and I got pretty excited, and I ran and retook those tests. It's been years since I've taken them. And we both kind of put them together and kind of spit out this analysis of how your personality and my personality can work with each other. And the concept has turned into something pretty cool, I think.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where self-reflection now is so much more of an important thing. When I was younger, I never really thought about me being different than anybody else because the only thing you know is yourself. And so you're like, of course, this is how it's actually going to work. And then as you start experiencing things and have friction points, you're like, wow, okay, I guess people are thinking different than me and work different than me and process things differently. So it's really valuable to understand actually how you work in these different things. So the Strength Finder one has by far been my favorite one so far, mostly because the question seems so random, and then the results were just absolutely right on the money there. But it was really eye-opening to me on a lot of these things because it just shows me actually like how I work, and more importantly, what my weaknesses are on some things. And then you did such a cool thing where you were able to take both of our reports and through the magic of ChatGPT and the new AI technology, really analyze these in depth. And I've taken a test at one of my previous employers that did all this big report, and it's really expensive. I think it was one of those DISC one, but it like had all these things on like how to manage people and how to do all these things, and you had to pay a premium for the service. Well, now you can take very basic tests and through the power of ChatGPT really go in depth analyzing these. And that's such a cool new thing that we have access to now.
Yeah. One thing that I found really cool is, I did Strength Finder early in my professional career. I was early 20s, mid 20s maybe. And I was able to redo it. So I did it the day after our interview with Jennifer just to refresh it. And it was cool to see that a lot had changed. You kind of assume your personality is your personality. But the way I kind of took the difference between my early 20s Strength Finder and my mid 30s, late 30s Strength Finder now is I think there's been a change in my personality or how I operate and how I view things. And that's a really good thing. In no way, shape, or form do I think that's a bad thing because as you know, there's not much I would like to revert in the way of my thinking from my 20s, right? So I'm growing. That's how I view it.
Yeah, well, they say your palette changes every 7 years, so why shouldn't your work personalities? And as we grow, we get different values, we change on all sorts of spectrums, so it makes perfect sense to kind of keep up to date with where you are and making sure that you're really living your professional life, I guess in the context of these tests, to their maximum. You're really understanding like what's an advantageous spot for you and where you could have the most leverage, and then what kind of positions and situations are you just going to be completely frustrated and not as effective in. Because as we dive deeper into these, the different tests, we really do see like where we're strong at, but also really where we're weak. And so such a huge part of it.
Yeah, and last thing before we kind of dive in, I wanted to point out as kind of my takeaway from this exercise was I was reading through yours, Tanner, and each time I was like, yep, that's him. Yep, that's Tanner. and what I found is you and I have a lot of differences in terms of personality and strengths. But when we get to the BP10, you'll find that you and I have a lot in common in how we work in our entrepreneurial mindset. And like you said, ChatGPT did a great job of analyzing that and comparing our two very different tests and identifying how best we can work together, but also the obstacles you and I might encounter working together. We've been at this for almost a year now, and I feel like, and we've been friends for many years. but I felt like this test gave me a better insight into you and how I can work more effectively with you to help support your strengths and vice versa. And I think in an entrepreneurial partnership kind of scenario, doing something like this could be a really, really big insight in how to best support each other and to know when someone might not be that strong in an area and someone else can step up for them.
Absolutely. And one of the things that when we were going through Founders University that they talked about was trying to make sure you have a good type of founders group where you can kind of support all the bases. And they talk a lot about like a technical founder, someone who's really good at design, someone who's good at like sales, someone who's good at administrative. And some people, can potentially check all those boxes, but most of the time you're needing to supplement to, if you're not a technical founder, to find someone who can join you to do those pieces. But this is really showing us there's another level to that, like some deeper layers to where there's people with how they work and what their types of strengths are and what their duties are that go beyond just like I'm technical or I'm more sales oriented or different things like that. And if you can really understand not only where you're deficient on those things, but maybe some potential partners are stronger, then again, you can really like build a machine that's going to take you to that next level. And then also you can really understand what are some potential conflicts or some friction points that might come up that could be disastrous for you. Because if you get two people that are just, again, one's a developer and one has a great idea, but personality wise, they're not going to, they're going to clash, or maybe they're too similar and then they're just going to, spiral into dreams and aspirations and never actually get anywhere. It's really good to understand those things.
Yeah. So as we dive into, we'll start with Strengths Finders first. I thought it would be really fun, Tanner, to read the other person's results. So I'm going to read your strengths, Tanner, from the Strengths Finder. So number 1, input. Loves to collect and archive information. Your strength is you're curious and knowledgeable. You can provide valuable insights and resources. And a potential challenge of this input strength is you may get bogged down in detail or struggle to decide what information is most pertinent. Now, obviously, I'm reading from our analysis, but when I read that first one, I was like, man, that is so Tanner. And I say that because I was digging deeper into the input strength, and, you love reading blogs and newspaper articles and, forums, tons of books. And not only do you read, Tanner, you synthesize and take notes and write in margins, and you absorb the information. I read all the time, but maybe a couple weeks down the road, I won't really remember key takeaways. Versus you read with the intent of absorbing and learning. And I thought that was really cool. And I was like, yep, that's him to a T.
Yeah,
and
that one really hit me on the head there.
Yeah, right. That's, man. Next one, which fits really well with that first one, is your second strength is the learner. He has a strong desire to learn and continuously improve. Your strength, you quickly grasp new concepts. You can seek on to new ways and seek new opportunities for growth. But you can really latch on to new ideas quickly because you kind of do a deep dive and you learn about things. You don't stay very surface level when a new concept comes your way. So one of the potential challenges of the learner mindset is you might become restless if not presented with new challenges or new learning opportunities. Now, we've had lots of conversations, right? And it's not a boredom I see that could be a potential challenge for you in this sense. It's just you are itching for that next thing, that next nugget of knowledge that's going to take you to that next level.
That's stagnation. That's probably that's one of the biggest issues I have.
Another one, which also just like I checked it off in my brain as, yep, that makes sense. Your next one's futuristic. You love to envision future possibilities and is inspired by the future. You are a born entrepreneur, Tanner. I think you love to take that knowledge and that learner aspect of you, learn new things, and then you can picture a new way of transforming that or utilizing that or transforming that into something that can be of value to you. That's how I see all of those bleeding together. Is just because you read a lot of books or a lot of blogs doesn't mean you stay there. It means you can use that knowledge and start envisioning ways to move forward and do something with that new knowledge. This one was a fun one. This next one was significance was your strength. Wants to be seen as significant in the eyes of others. The strength of this is you're motivated to achieve and accomplish meaningful tasks. You are a motivated task individual, Tanner, by far, especially compared to me. The potential challenges, you might be sensitive to criticism or too focused on external validation. That one I felt like could be a little hurtful, I think, but how do you feel about that one?
I've recognized that one. I have to I have to have praise constantly, and I've known that for a long time. I've never been a person who has enjoyed being in the middle of the pack. I either have to win it or I choose not to play. And there's a lot of times that that's really been to my disadvantage, especially when I was in school, because if I was really interested in it, I was either an A student or like a D student. I rarely got B's and C's because I was either all in or I was all out. And part of that, I mean, again, like if you look at the higher parts, like with the imprint learning, it's not due to the want, but due to what are the factors that are keeping me motivated, and am I getting enough recognition and not necessarily, I guess praise would be the right word too, but just enough validation through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't see that as a negative. I think it can be taken with a negative connotation that you're seeking validation, but that's your fourth strength. The other three are about how you deep dive, you do your research, and you learn all of this, and then you want to envision how that can be useful to yourself or other people, and you just want that to be seen. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it could be a weak spot by not seeking that, and you just kind of fade off into nothing, right? So finally, your last strength is responsibility. You take ownership and is committed to meeting obligations. The strength, you're reliable and trustworthy, can be counted on to fulfill promises. And the potential challenge there is you may become overwhelmed by taking on too many obligations, or feel burdened by others' expectations. I have always considered you a rather mature person, and by that I mean, taking responsibility. If Tanner says he's going to do something, Tanner will probably get it done. And that's how I've always viewed you.
Yeah, that's been a huge thing with me, especially in business. I struggle, and this is surprisingly, the more I dive deeper into the corporate world and different things, I realize how many people are just winging things and not actually thinking about the result. And I had a situation recently where someone was putting together like a presentation on something, and to do it right was going to take a considerable amount of time. And they're like, oh, I'll just go in and I'll just throw the things in and just do it. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't just like half-heartedly, I can't fudge the numbers. I have to do the things. Whatever I do, I have to stand behind and believe that I can at least deliver on what I'm promising off these things. So the products that, we deliver on, I feel like they have to be of the utmost quality. They have to excel. They have to be things. And that goes back to the significance portion too. I need to be an expert or a master of whatever I'm doing, because if I tell you I'm going to do it, it'll get done. If you tell me I need to do it and I don't actually respond to you, it's probably not going to get done. So yeah, again, I feel like those strengths really do encapsulate me. And that's why this has been by far one of my favorite tests. It's just like, yep, that's me, 100%. Like just a giant sponge who's looking for applications to use that stuff and basically get some clout off of it. That's pretty much me.
But that is entrepreneurship in a nutshell. You do your research, you know where you want to go. You can take that information and knowledge and turn it into a potential idea. And then you have that drive, that ability, and that responsibility to accomplish those tasks and get things done. And that's a big strength. And there's nothing wrong with wanting some recognition.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing. So let's dive into your strengths. So Wyatt's strengths. Number 1, adaptability. This is so true. Just like how my first one was learning, Wyatt is. This goes into your career. This goes into how I know you. You can easily go with the flow, and you are resourceful in the face of change. Well, Mr. Change Management over here. So you can stay calm under pressure, and you're flexible in various situations. That's the big strength of it. But you might struggle with long-term planning or decision making. And I can see you, and it's definitely shown in what you're finding success with in your career, your project. You can get things done. It's high pressure, quick timelines, high stakes a lot of time, because your clients are paying lots of money and there's a lot on the line for them. There's a lot of value you need to produce. And you go into it not necessarily knowing what it's going to look like. So you got to read everything and go with the flow and really analyze and deliver for those people. And I think that's good. Again, the hard part though is the long-term planning, right? It's what is Wyatt going to be in the next quarter? Where's Wyatt need to be in the next year? What's your long-term goals, your plans? So you need to kind of supplement right there.
It was spot on. And I kind of laughed when I first saw this because I like to distinguish that private Wyatt and work Wyatt are very different people. But one thing that stays consistent is I'm just a really easygoing guy and not a lot bugs me. I'm kind of the cliche surfer guy from, that lives in California and just kind of lives on a beach. Is like, yeah, whatever, man, go with the flow. I am that way, both privately and at work. And this one cracked me up. Now, the potential challenge of that, the long-term planning, is also spot on. People are like, oh, where do you see yourself in 1, 3, 5 years? I have no idea. I don't know what I'll be doing in 2 weeks. And I've become okay with that. And that can be pretty frustrating from a partnership perspective, though. This is one of those obstacles I can see and especially from your strengths, Tanner, you very easily can identify goals and long-term achievements that you want to complete and then make those steps to accomplish that. My brain doesn't work that way. I see the problem and I will attack that problem and we'll get it knocked out. But then I kind of just wait for the next thing to hit me in the face.
Yeah, you're really good at living in the present. And that's something that I have to definitely work on. And we've talked about that quite a bit. Number 2, empathy. Can sense the emotions of those around them and understand their feelings. You build deep connections and offer understanding and support. Again, this goes perfect with what you're doing in your career because you go and you interview people and you look at these things and you really understand where they're coming from and where those needs are, but also you're really concerned that the decisions and the findings that you do are going to be a net benefit for those people that you're working for. And I remember in a previous episode, you talked about how your job is different than how a lot of people think it is. Because when we think about the movie Office Space and the Bobs and how they're just going to come in and fire everybody and they're just kind of these callous, soulless drones that are just there for the corporate good. And you were telling me, I was like, no, actually, like a lot of companies, they invest a lot in these people and it's all about finding the right place for them and moving them around and making sure they're getting the most out of each employee. And actually, staff reduction is a very small part of the projects that you've been doing. And so the empathy that you bring with it is huge. Of course, the potential challenge is you may become emotionally drained or too affected by other feelings. And I've seen that with you too. I know you've had people you work with, people you've worked for, and something bad happens or they have a life circumstance that happens and you are just so invested and drained and you want to help them out. And a lot of times there's nothing you can do because it's their lives, but you still want to try, and it's really admirable. But man, that's a lot of energy you put into it.
This is why I thought I would make a good manager, is because I feel for other people. But I learned because of that potential challenge that maybe management's not my skill set. And I say that after a lot of kind of self-assessment of my own, because no one wants to say, I don't want to be a manager, especially in the corporate world, right? That's a promotion, blah, blah. I stepped my foot into that a couple times, and each time it became too much. And you're spot on. Whether one of your employees is, having a horrible life circumstance and you have to deal with that, or vice versa, if you have to put on your kind of grumpy manager shoes and deal with the problem. One of my challenges is I might not be able to rise to that occasion where I can put my foot down in order to move forward. Does that make sense? I'm trying to not be a jerk. I can't be a jerk after I've kind of become emotionally involved with people. So I step back from management because I recognize this as it's a strength in what I do, but it can be a weakness depending on the role I'm playing at the time. Yeah.
I think you'd make a much better coach than manager because you're directly looking for their growth and their success, but not necessarily the operations of the department as a whole, because you serve different masters in each of those roles. So number 3, developer, see the potential in others and is driven to help them succeed. So again, this goes right back into what you were just talking about, but again, the empathy part of it, that potential challenge just really hits you. So your strength, you can encourage growth in others, you can offer constructive feedback, but the challenge is, you might become impatient if they don't grow and change. And I can definitely see that because you're like, come on, why can't I help you here? And why can't you recognize what I'm telling you? But again, that one just nails it on the head for you.
Yeah, the empathy and developer, empathy and developer, they fit in really well together.
Yeah. Number 4, ideation thrives on coming up with new and novel ideas. Perfect alignment with your career choice, Mr. I solve problem, I cause change, and I make things more efficient. So you can be creative and innovative to the team, but you may get distracted by too many eyes or struggles with execution. So again, this is where your career really aligns well with tight deadlines, because if you were in a position where you don't have those tight deadlines, you probably would just kind of keep improving and working and noodling on it indefinitely. But when it's like, man, this is due to the client and next Monday, you just nose to the grindstone and you can get it done.
This is one where I felt validated in my career. I tell everyone that I love my job. I love my career. What I have chose to focus on, I'm truly passionate about. And I think it's because of this ideation. I do get to be creative, and I get to look at really big, complex problems and figure out interesting ways to try and overcome that. Now, the challenge, like you said, and you and I have talked about this outside of this a long time ago. We both have the capability to be shoot for the moon kind of people. I'm going to build a rocket ship, and we got to start off by building a scooter. That's one of the downfalls of that too. I've come up with some fantastic ideas for companies before, and I've had people look at me like I was a complete idiot for even suggesting it because it was way out of scope.
Yeah. And the final one, intellection. Enjoys deep thinking and intellectual discussion. So just like the ideation, you want to build those rocket ships, right? You're inspired, you're digging through the things and the motivating aspect of that. So you can provide well thought out perspectives and solutions, but you might overanalyze things and get into the world without taking action. So just like we were talking about, it is so good in the role that you're doing because it constrains you in the right ways, but it enables you in the others. And I love what you're saying. You're like, I love my job. And there's so many people that are in situations that they don't, because they don't understand where their strengths are. And I think that's kind of this whole goal of this podcast, right? It might be a little boring just to listen to us and you might understand this a bit deeper, but who are we in your lives other than just someone you're listening to? Think about these different pieces and how they are related to you, and then what you're spending the most amount of time and energy on, especially in your career. Because if you're in alignment, then, that hammer is light in your hand. But if you're not, then it feels just heavy and it's annoying and it's just effort and it's an expense. And so it's really cool that you have found that alignment.
No, and that's spot on. I think people fall into jobs or careers that are in complete, disarray, or they don't align to their strengths and they would be miserable. For example, I could never do a sales job ever in my life. I am absolute trash when it comes to sales. It just doesn't mesh with my personality. And if I, for some reason had to take a sales job, I would be miserable in it and I'd hate every minute of it. But it's different for people. And you're absolutely right. If you can find something that aligns with your strengths and helps bolster and improve your weaknesses, that's a win-win.
Absolutely. So just to quickly kind of go through, and we'll hit that entrepreneur BP10 one right here soon. But I love your little notes, like how we can work effectively. So together we can have planning and vision. We can have growth and development. We can provide each other emotional balance, the execution and adaptability, as well as just solid discussion and insights. So, each of those pieces work so good together to what, we can find. But there's a dark side too, right? You want to kind of go over some of the potential pitfalls of our personalities going together.
Right. So outside of analyzing Tanner and I strength finders and then identifying how our personalities could work well together, I wanted to know how it could create conflict. And this is going to be a big piece. If you're starting a new venture, you're building a new business, and you have a partner, you're going to have conflict. Conflict exists. and how you handle it can make or break your new business. It could just be a new friend you're making in a completely non-business relationship. How you handle conflict determines ultimately how successful that relationship is. So I wanted to get a jump on it with Tanner. So how can Tanner and Wyatt's strengths conflict? So decision-making speed. So Tanner, you've got that futuristic and responsibility strengths. You have a clear vision, a sense of how to accomplish that, and you want to accomplish that methodically. And then there's Wyatt over here with like, yeah, man, whatever works. Adaptability only goes so far as long as it doesn't kind of tip over into just passiveness. So this could lead to some tension regarding how fast decisions should be made and how closely they should stick to their initial vision and the cadence that you accomplish those tasks as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that you and I have had issues with in the past is you felt like I was steamrolling you a bit because I was taking those. I was like, okay, I see where we're going. I'm going to drive us there. And then you're like, I don't feel like I'm actually like making any decisions or things through this course. And then I had to go back and go like, well, okay, just because there's a lot of times where you're just like, oh yeah, that's fine. And then all of a sudden you're just like, wait a second, this is, what's happening here? So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. So focus on external validation and internal ideas was the next one. So your significant strength could drive a need for external validation, possibly wanting business to gain recognition and accolades quickly. In contrast, with my ideation and intellection strengths, accordingly, it might be more focused on intrinsic value of the ideas, the process of refining them, that sort of thing. It may not always be value and recognition from my perspective, but more the process, right? Which makes sense. I'm a process guy, and you are a successful, business owner. So I think those show very strongly in our past. Yeah.
I think just going back to a previous thing we had early when we started the podcast was you were trying to figure out like what this was the whole time. You're like, what's our theme? What we're this thing? And you're like so focused on me. I'm just like, let's make content that like I was just thinking like, let's just make content. Let's find the thing we enjoy and get this out to people because part of this is I want that feedback from the listeners and I want that status. And I love watching the view counts and download counts. And I probably need to be a little less obsessed with that. But that's a perfect example of where there was a little bit of conflict, even though it wasn't like stressful, but it's still a friction point, right? Where you're like, we need to do this here. And I'm like, no, we need to focus on this here. Mm-hmm. And man, it hits us right on the head, doesn't it?
I know. So this next one's interesting. And I think this is a big warning for us. So the next one is emotional balance. So with my high empathy strength, it means, you're emotionally attuned to people. You can tell when people are mad, frustrated, upset, that sort of thing. I absorb a lot of negative feedback quickly. This could contrast with your significant strength, where you might be sensitive to criticism or perceived failures. Could lead to some heightened emotional reactions from both of us during stressful moments. And I think this is probably of all of these, the one that I really kind of stored away in the back of my mind, because conflict happens. It's happened to us before. It's happened to us again. And any partnership anyone out there has, you're going to encounter conflict. No one is ever aligned 100%. But understanding how both people could ultimately kind of get geared up and have this emotional reaction to a friction point that might have started relatively small and only grew bigger is something that can help save that relationship down the road.
Absolutely. And for me, I spent a lot of time in art to where I can handle criticism pretty well, but it's been a learned skill. But I struggle with perceived failure. I do everything that I can to not fail. So this is very eye-opening for me to understand like how my reactions can impact you, right? So I need to keep things in check to not let things spiral out of control, and then vice versa, to where if I am in a weak moment, you realize, okay, like I need to be a bit more guarded and shield myself from this, coming at me, so we don't go downhill. So that's such a good one.
Yeah. So this next one, I'm gonna go fast because I can put this in a synopsis pretty quickly. Is we both have the potential to overthink. which cracked me up. You with your input strength and me with the intellection strength, we both love deep thinking. You and I, and we have many times, we could just chat for a very long time on some crazy philosophy or a concept, and we love that stuff. It's also can lead to a trap if both of us get too bogged down in, going down a rabbit hole and learning and oh, what about this? And what about this path? At some point we have to figure out how to dig ourselves out of the idea hole and start in an action, phase. I loved that one because it shows a lot of similarities with how we work too.
Well, as we've been working, through Founders University on different projects and stuff, we found this exact issue where we were just constantly refining and moving and going here, but we never really launched. And so, knowing this probably 8 months ago would have been fantastic, right?
No kidding. So next one's motivation. Tanner, driven by significance, may seek big milestones and public achievements. At the same time, Wyatt, with the developer, may find motivation in small wins and growth over time. That's absolutely how I view things. I've never gone into a thing expecting to be the best in the world or, anything like that. But it's kind of, I do enjoy the small wins. Hey, we reached this XYZ, even if it's a tiny milestone, we're making progress. And that is very accurate with how I see it. But what that means for motivation differences is it may be hard for both of us to collaboratively gauge those milestones in a venture together. What is a successful podcast to you may be completely different to me or vice versa.
Yeah. And you got to recognize the downfalls, but think about the upsides too. So you being positive with the small things will keep me going, but me driving us towards the big things will also take us further. So, I mean, it's everything about this is such a nice double-edged sword in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This fun one, navigating change. My strength, obviously, my biggest strength was adaptability. So that is what it is. Can be pretty flexible. However, this might conflict with your responsibility strength. You feel a duty to meet commitments, timelines, all of these things. And if we don't accomplish them or something changes and we have to kind of shift gears, that could cause stress. And having Wyatt over here being like, yeah, man, whatever, it's all cool, could probably make you pretty frustrated because you had a path forward and we didn't reach that. And so that's something I think the moral of the story of what we're trying to get at is here. All strengths come with weaknesses, and all weaknesses can be flipped and learned from to turn into strengths, really.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the BP10 one. That one, again, I feel like the Strength Finders one is something that everybody should do themselves because you get a lot more personal insight off of this. The BP10 assessment, what does the BP stand for again?
Business. I don't know.
I couldn't remember off the top of my head.
I totally lost it too.
But nonetheless.
But the intent of the BP10 is to focus purely on those entrepreneurial insights, right? And those key talents for building something.
Yeah. So let's go into our top ones here to start. So your top strength as an entrepreneur, you are a disruptor. You enjoy challenging the status quo and imagining better ways of doing things, which again goes perfect with your change management background. So you're very innovation driven, can identify opportunities for change and improvement. Again, man, these assessments are just nailing you right on the head. But you might face some resistance from those who prefer traditional methods or stability. So thankfully, that is not me because I love change. But yeah, my number one, if you want to hit that one.
Yeah, so your number one was knowledge, which fits really well with your Strength Finder results as well. So you continually seek to learn and understand more about your chosen industry, your path, your interest at the time. It provides you some really solid depth and expertise in whatever you want to pursue, which makes you a formidable entrepreneur, honestly. The potential challenges of that is you might get bogged down in the details and lose sight of a broader strategy. So once again, it's pretty easy to go down those rabbit holes.
Yeah. So much of me it comes down to mastery too. It is like absorb as much as I can, but then part of it goes back to that significance as being the best at it. And so I just keep digging and digging and digging in on the layers. Number two. So this one was actually like, I think my absolute bottom one, which is kind of hilarious. Your number two strength was delegator. So the ability to recognize other strengths and delegate tasks effectively. Again, this goes back perfectly to what you're doing each week. You yourself as a consultant are not coming through and doing the work yourself. You're building the plan for it. Mm-hmm. I can't do that, man. I can't do that. I'm not a lone wolf per se, but I have always in my life, part of it's been coming from a more rural area where there isn't a lot of like people. I'm not surrounded in a large community on people who whatever interests I have, but I am weak there, and I am thankful you are strong in that regard.
No. So what I really enjoyed is your number two was my number one. So you got disruptor. Similar to me, you enjoy challenging the traditional way of doing things. Like you said, you love change. And I think the willingness and kind of excitement for change is a very strong strength of an entrepreneur. And regardless of what you're doing, if you want to succeed as an entrepreneur, you need to find new and better ways of doing something that's probably already been done, right? You're not going to invent the next big thing. The next big thing's already been made. Your opportunity is to figure out how to change that and morph that and make it more valuable for the consumers of whatever that means. So that disruptor, for both of us to have that, I viewed that as kind of the aha moment, which is why we work, which is why you and I get along, which is why we can have these conversations, is because we like change and we recognize it as essential to building something.
Absolutely. And change is exciting. Like, who wants to listen to a podcast about like keeping everything the same? I mean, I'm sure there's people who live their lives like going like, I want my each day to be the last, but I'm like, no, man, like I want
boring.
Like, yeah, definitely. And there's a story, and this is kind of, it talks about the difference between people who are liberal and who are conservative. And it's like you're in a field and you see a fence. And they talk about like how the liberals like, oh, they don't see any reason for it. And so they want to change and they move it. And then there's the conservatives like, oh, no, this fence was built there for a purpose. I don't know what that is. And so I'm going to keep it there. I was trying to think of like my personality with that. And I'm like, it's not that I would tear down the fence, but I'm thinking like, how can I build a better fence? Like how could this fence be improved? How could this go through? So I don't know. It's just constantly wanting to change things, but not necessarily disrupt everything.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we got your number three, and this is another one that I'm super weak at, surprisingly, which is profitability. So the focus on the bottom line and ensure financial viability. So you drive the venture towards financial success and stability, but you might prioritize profits over other aspects such as culture or stakeholder relationships.
So this is one that I think is one of the big changes from when I took these tests, 12 years ago, starting out in the corporate world or whatever, to today, and in my career. I think this is one of those ways my career has changed me, because in process improvement, no one hires process improvement people because they want to change things. That's not the reason. People hire process improvement people because by changing things, you can make a lot of money or save a lot of money. And a big piece of my job is validating my results. It has to be, I did XYZ and it's going to result in ABC amount of savings or money. And that is a huge part of my career, of what I do every single day, is financial validation and focusing on, is it going to be good for the employee? Is it going to be good for the customer? And is it going to be good for the bottom line? And I think that's been something that's just kind of naturally absorbed into my personality.
Yeah, and that's one of those things I was thinking about, again, where stuff ranks for both of us. And it makes sense. And in your life, you're also very like able to do what you need to do. You're actually very financially responsible, and you're very not money is everything or anything like that, but you're very understanding what you need to hit milestones in your life off of those things. And part of me was kind of surprised that it was so low for me, but then I go back and reflect, and I think like, no, it actually makes perfect sense, because I've had quite a few discussions recently with quite a few different people around what is what is worth time doing to get the most. Like, it's not worth my time to do it, essentially. Like, there's not enough meat on the bone, enough money on the project, enough thing in the effort to get out of it. And they're like, well, I just want somebody who, to help somebody out, or I want to do this. And I was like, man, am I cold and calloused around profit? And then I realized, no, actually, I don't care about the amount of money from the deal. It goes back to the strength finders. It goes back to the responsibility that I have, the commitments I have to like my family. So it's, I need to actually do activities that bring in enough income so I can uphold those ends. But also, there probably isn't enough significance to build out of it too. And a lot of it's more recognition driven than it is profit driven. So
yeah, there you go. That makes sense. So this next one for you is independence. You prefer to work autonomously and trust their instincts. No duh. If you know Tanner, that's you, man. I'm surprised that wasn't your first one, honestly. But the potential challenge of that independence is you might struggle with collaboration or taking advice. And I don't know if that's something you personally struggled with, but might just be something to be aware of. You're a very independent person. So when people try to interject into a project or a thought process, it could rub you the wrong way.
Yeah. And perhaps it goes back to when I was a kid playing with Legos all by myself in my room or playing with dinosaurs. My mom always said that I was a very good kid to just hang out by myself and do different things. So it's hardwired somewhere into me.
Yeah.
Number 4 is the same for both of us.
Yes,
so we
I
actually
love this.
share 2 of the 4, which is, again, why I think it's a great match. Risk. We're comfortable taking calculated risks when the opportunities arise. We seize opportunities. We don't hesitate. But, we might just misjudge and fall flat on our face. So this one was pleasantly surprising to see on your list, but it makes sense. And I know for me, I've always been the type of person, like I see something like, let's go do it. And then we just go do it. Like you kind of see that opportunity. And in reflection for you, it makes perfect sense. Cause I'm like, hey, Wyatt, I have this idea for this. And you're like, let's do it, man. Like I'm in. And it's such a neat shared trait that we have.
Well, I appreciate you were able to do that because when I saw it, I didn't think it fit with me either. And I still haven't fully wrapped my head around it. I've never considered myself a risk taker. So I'm gonna have to do more thought on that. But I was happy to see it, and the fact that we lined up twice on 4 strengths, which I love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it goes into you do take a lot of change in there, and change requires risk. I mean, again, are you going to stay with things are you going to take that initiative to do that? And that can, and maybe some of the risks, aren't financially driven because you have the profitability aspect where you've analyzed it, you understand that you can make money off of it, but you're just not going to be scared to not take that action. You're just going to go out and do it. And again, going back to what you do, you have to have a level of fearlessness to go into a big company and say you're the authority here and how things need to be changed and do those assessments. That's a lot to put on the table for somebody.
Get really good at putting that mask on.
Yeah.
So quick synopsis, how we can work effectively together from this BP10 and from an entrepreneurial standpoint, which is why I wanted to do this test, because that's the point of this podcast. That's the point you and I are working together. Share disruption. We are both disruptors. We can find, like I said, it's not that we're, and this goes for anyone. It's not that you're going to build the world's next greatest thing. It just doesn't work that way anymore. The best opportunity when you want to go out on your own venture is to find a problem, identify possible solutions. Then with that, you need to identify what solutions already exist and how you could do it better, how you can better serve your customer segment, how you can do it better for whoever you want to serve. That's disruption. It's not creating the most amazing new tech product that we haven't even thought of yet. That's not going to happen probably. But with disruption and wanting to change things, you could take anything and make it better if you just put enough thought into it.
Yeah. And then we have balancing knowledge and delegation. So this one I was thinking about quite a bit too. So I, again, struggle with delegating, and I'm very independent, as one of the strengths talk about, and all those things. So it's really nice that we can collaborate where I come up with a topic and you're able to help parse things out, just like you did today. We found this little thing. You were able to put together all the notes, keep things organized, keep us structured, and kind of build a topic off of it. or I can find some subjects and then some thought leaders on the space. And then you're so good at like going out and reaching out to these people and following up and getting things scheduled off of it. So it's so nice to have the ability to support each other in those ways and understand where the strengths are. And, I mean, it's a balancing act like anything. So could be vice versa. I go and schedule interviews, so it's not just only on you or anything like that, but it's really powerful to understand like how we can collaborate off that.
And I think I'm just going to skip to the final kind of conclusion because it really highlights what you just said. You and I, our combined talents make for a dynamic entrepreneurial duo. They really do. And I'm glad that we've kind of came to that conclusion ourselves before we even take these tests. But open communication and mutual respect is absolutely crucial. And if any one of those, the communication or respect from us breaks down, you and I will have conflict. And that's just how our personalities work. But being able to identify and recognize that now, we can hopefully cushion and recognize when we're going down that path and hopefully save a relationship, save a business, save a podcast. Not that Tanner and I are beefing. That's not what I'm trying to get across in this podcast. But just knowing how you two support each other and then how you also might fight. Those are important things to know.
Yeah, and it's so cool to see like these tests that actually like can accurately represent, and like you said, where you are now, because you will evolve, you will change, you have different stages in your life, you have different responsibilities in your life. Young Tanner before he had a family was way more reckless. It would be like, we have a friend and he would just, come over at 12:30 at night and go like, let's go to Colorado. And I'm like, let's go to Colorado. And you just end up, in a completely different state away on some adventure. And that's not me now. And the same person who started the first company, we had our friends show up and he goes, hey, there's a business plan competition. We should do this. And I was like, we should do this. And then did a crap ton of research and built some really cool stuff and you threw it. But having someone come over now probably wouldn't do, I wouldn't do that because I'm a little bit more self-led. So while some part of you are the same, some of it changes, and you'd be amazed at what pieces creep up. Like you said, profitability is a big one, and surprisingly risk for you.
Right. I know. So I think we can kind of skip that last one because we covered the conflicts as well in this BP10. I think the point Tanner and I were getting across here is we didn't just want to talk about ourselves and our personality. That's not what we were trying to do here. But because we are a partnership, whether it's a podcast, an entrepreneurial adventure, a friendship, we are a partnership and a duo. And we were able to take these and put them together and say, this is how we work together. This is what I need. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. These are yours. And with that, we can help each other. I strongly, strongly recommend anyone out there who is working with a partner or who wants to start a venture where they know they're going to need a partnership to do something similar to these strengths finders, the enneagrams, the discs. Now, I've heard these tests referred to as astrology for people who wear ties. That's fair. I understand that. All I'm saying is, if you gain value from these, I strongly recommend taking it again. If you've ever worked in a corporate office, you've probably taken some of these, maybe all of them. Take them again if it's been a while. People change, you change, and your needs, strengths, and weaknesses also change. But the best thing you could do for yourself and your partnership, whoever that is to understand where you guys work well together and where you might conflict and to be prepared for that conflict, because I guarantee you conflict's going to happen.
Well, just like so much in your life, self-reflection and really understanding yourself is so important. I mean, we talked about it earlier in the podcast, but just knowing where your strengths are, where you can bring value, how your brain ticks, and what's going to trigger you and where your pitfalls are is so important before you go externally and partner up with other people. Because this is important, whether it's on a business venture where you're going one for one or, a side project. It's also important to understand if you start adding employees or you have people working for you, you start working with vendors off of these different things, because you understanding both yourself, but then start reading into where they might be as well is a huge thing. Because if you're the type of person who gets triggered by very independent, crazy, willy-nilly people who go on all sorts of tangents, you need to recognize that right away. And vice versa, if you are somebody who is like a steamroller, you're get things done type person, You don't want to hire the person who, again, is that creative type, perhaps, or something like that, who gets to things completely different because you may conflict, or you just have to recognize how you need to scale things back to get the most out of them. So it's really cool. I'm fascinated with the subject, and I'm happy that we did it.
Me
And again,
too.
perhaps it's a little bit more for us than it is for the audience, but maybe they'll get some good value out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do find any value out of Tanner and I talking about ourselves for this episode, it's that Tanner and I have known each other for, what we discussed, like 16, 17 years, somewhere along a long time. And I learned something really, really impactful and important about Tanner doing this. And you can too. Just because you've been with someone a long time, you're friends with someone a long time, doesn't mean that people don't change. And learning how you interact with people can completely change your dynamic and potentially your future with them.
Yep. So yeah, we'd love to hear what you thought of this episode, and I guess in comment section or message us if you've done one of these tests. Like, post what your results are and how you think you might, how it's impacted you there and help you understand things, because it's really cool, to go through. And some people put these things in their LinkedIn profiles and stuff like that, and you're like, okay, I know what type of person this is, and that helps. So. But yeah, we'd love to hear. And if you haven't already, we have been getting quite a few 5-star ratings on Spotify, which has been fantastic. So thank you to everyone who's rated that. If you haven't yet and you have the opportunity, please subscribe, rate our shows. It really helps with expanding our reach and stuff like that. And if you find this valuable or a previous episode valuable, share it with a friend. It helps so much. We're really loving the responses that we've been getting and the growing of the community here. So we just love to continue that momentum.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Yep. We'll see you all next week. Bye.